Hello, welcome to the first podcast from Aaron Swartz Day and the Aaron Swartz Institute. And we're calling it just the Aaron Swartz Podcast. So we're really happy to have you with us here today. We are both mourning the loss of our friend. It's the 11th anniversary of his death, or it was on January 11th. And also looking forward, but we are going to do something that people have been asking me to do for a long time, which is to really get into explanation of what happened and why, and something that I wasn't really able to do until recently, really the last few years when all the pieces kind of finally came together. So today I am here live with Andre Sevral. Andre, say hello. Yes. And hey, and I think Grant might be showing on the screen. That's our wonderful producer, Grant Ellis, who helps me do all these streams, and I'm really thankful for his involvement. So right away, I wanted to start off with a proper sort of moment, not quite a moment of silence, but definitely a moment of contemplation, playing a video that Brewster made in 2015, a poem he wrote about Aaron. And this is Howl for Aaron Swartz.
Howl for Aaron Swartz, written by Brewster Kale, me, shortly after Aaron's death. Howl for Aaron Swartz, new ways to create culture smashed by lawsuits and bullying, laws that paint most of us criminal. Inspiring young leaders, sharing everything, living open source lives, inspiring communities selflessly, organizing, preserving, sharing, promoting. Then crushed by government, crushed by politicians for a modest fee, crushed by corporate spreadsheet outsourced business development. New ways, new communities, then infiltrated, baited, set up, arrested, celebrating public spaces, learning, trying, exploring, targeted by corporate security snipers, ending up in databases, ending up in prison. Traps set by those that promised change. Surveillance, wide eyes watching everyone now. Government surveillance that cannot be discussed or questioned. Corporate surveillance that is accepted with a click. Terrorists here, terrorists there. More guns in schools to promote more guns business. Rendition, torture, manning, solitary power. Open minds, open source, open eyes, open society. Public access to the public domain. Now closed out of our devices. Closed out of owning books. Hands off. Do not open. Criminal prosecution. Traps designed by the Silicon Wizards with remarkable abilities to self-justify. Traps sprung by a generation that vowed not to repeat COINTELPRO and dirty tricks and democratic national conventions. Government-produced malware so sophisticated that career engineers go home each night thinking what? Saying what to their families and friends? Debt for school, debt for houses, debt for life. Credit scores, treadmills with chains. Inspiring and optimistic explorers navigating a sea of traps set by us. I see traps ensnare our inspiring generation, leaders and discoverers finding new ways and getting crushed for it.
You're muted.
Sorry. That I remember when we filmed that with Brewster, and he actually didn't want me to make it public for a few years. There's a lot of strange politics around Aaron's situation, as we're about to find out. Mainly with this weird thing where it looked like MIT had a not a passive role, but more of an active role in working with the government on Aaron's prosecution. So I'm just going to give a rundown to remind people what happened. Just a little refresher. It's actually kind of simple. Now it's simple. After all these years of talking about it, I can finally say it simply. And so basically, Aaron was an ethics fellow at Harvard, and he was downloading. He downloaded a large number of articles over an open network, the MIT network. He had permission to do it, as we'll find out from his attorney, through contracts that Harvard and MIT had made with each other. But the way that Aaron was doing it was using free accounts and using a script to do it faster. And then when the account got cut off, he would just make another free account. He put his laptop into an open closet on the MIT network. He used an Ethernet cable to plug into the network in the closet. Again, no hacking. That was turned into a wire fraud count, though. And then he had a hard drive attached to his laptop, and he left it there. And then he came back in a couple of days and picked it up. And then when he was on his way home was when he was famously knocked off his bike by the police. And there's videos you can find online of him waiting in the police station, trying to figure out why they had arrested him. And then the grand jury started, and it was the grand jury led by, God, I'm forgetting his name now, Carmen Ortiz and Douglas Heyman. And they basically made his life hell to try to get him to cop to these hacking charges that really didn't make any sense. There wasn't any hacking that took place. Again, he didn't hack into the network. He didn't hack into JSTOR. He didn't hack into anything, as his lawyer is about to explain. And it was really a way for the prosecutor to make a name for himself. Stephen Heyman, I should say, not Douglas Heyman, excuse me. And Carmen Ortiz, the U.S. attorney at the time, they were on this cybersecurity, cyber attack. We're going to save everyone. This is when Anonymous was very popular, and they were just sort of freaking out. So let's watch this clip from Aaron's attorney. This is the second set of attorneys that he had. And it's really kind of a sad story there, because things were starting to turn around in his case in different ways, but he hadn't been notified yet. It wasn't clear that everything was turning around. The attorneys knew that it wasn't as bad. Certainly what the feds were doing was ridiculous, but there was no plea agreement less than 3 months in a federal prison. And so it was the idea of being branded a felon and spending 3 months in prison after copying a plea deal for something you didn't do. And then his friends and family were starting to get drawn into it. He ended up not telling anybody about what was going on because he didn't want to draw them into it. And so people didn't understand what was going on and the extent of what was going on. So let's listen to Dan Purcell from Aaron Swartz Day 2014. The clip is about 13 minutes, and it really explains it all very clearly. Play the clip. Thank you.
Howl for Aaron.
Evening, everybody. My name's Dan Purcell. I'm a lawyer here in San Francisco with a firm called Kecker and Van Nest, and I was one of Aaron's lawyers in his criminal case back in 2012 and early 2013. You can tell I'm a lawyer and not a hacker because I'm using paper and not a computer. I didn't know Aaron that well, and our interactions were always colored by the fact that he probably would rather not be talking to me. I was a criminal defense lawyer, after all, and he was only talking with me because he was facing a federal indictment under the CFAA for computer fraud. Many of you knew Aaron, and some of you knew him very well. And so you don't need me to tell you what sort of person he was. Brian Knappenberger's excellent movie, which is going to follow me, will tell you a lot more than I could. But one thing Aaron was not was a criminal. And I'm here to clear up a few things that you might have heard, a few misconceptions you may have about what he did and what he was charged with. Maybe this is an inappropriate thing to say at a hackathon, but one thing that drives me a little bit crazy is when people refer to Aaron as being charged with hacking, or refer to the things that he allegedly did as hacking. And they do it in a sort of pejorative, scary way. And it's just nonsense. Now, of course, Aaron was a hacker in the broad sense of the term. He was an innovative thinker. He was looking for creative ways around problems. But in the criminal sense of the word, as somebody who breaks into a secure computer system for nefarious purposes, Aaron was no hacker, and he didn't do anything like that. One thing that Aaron strongly believed was that human knowledge was public property. All the advances, the discoveries, the secrets that we've collectively unlocked over millennia about how the world works, they belong to all of us, generally. And he resented people and entities who tried to not lock up that knowledge and keep it away from general use so they could monetize it for their personal gain. And you might be surprised, maybe you're not actually, at how much money is being made in the world by entities that follow just that business model. They take things that are in the public domain and they take them away from the public domain, and then they charge for access to them. One field where this happens a lot is academic publishing. Now obviously there's so much information in books that it's not practical to just have physical copies of them lying around. Digitizing all that data is an easy solution. And indeed, there are many places to look up scholarly material online, but when you go to try to do that, you'll generally find that there's a subscription fee, or you can't access them unless you're affiliated with a certain institution. They're not public, and they're not available for public use. And this bothered Aaron, and it bothered him a lot. And he had struggled with this issue over his life, over the previous years before his run-in with MIT. But he wanted to teach the system a lesson, and he went to MIT, which is a university that had and still has probably the most wide-open computer network in the world, certainly for an institution of that size. At the time he did what he did, in 2010, 2011, anybody could walk into MIT's campus with or without a student ID, with or without any affiliation with MIT at all, and they could log on to MIT's system as a guest, didn't have to use their real name, and then they could do whatever they wanted on MIT's system. And one thing that MIT made available to its users was access to JSTOR, which is an online database of scholarly materials. So anybody in the world could go to MIT's campus and they could get onto JSTOR and they could download articles from JSTOR. Anyone. And so that's what Aaron did. He went to the MIT campus like anyone could have done. He logged onto the system like anyone could have done. He went into JSTOR like anyone could have done, and he downloaded articles. And that is not hacking. That is walking through a door that MIT, the owner of the door, left open for anyone to walk through. Of course, the story is not exactly that simple, because as we saw with the keepgrabbing.py program, Aaron didn't want to take the time to manually download thousands of articles. That would have been impractical. So he wrote what I'm told, I'm pretty ignorant of this stuff, but what I'm told is a fairly simple computer program that enabled downloading to happen, and he left his laptop behind and he went on his way. He downloaded the files, but he didn't steal anything. You know, all the articles that he downloaded stayed in the JSTOR database. They were still available to anybody with access to JSTOR. And if you have a JSTOR subscription, you go to the database, they're still there today. So he didn't deprive anybody of that material. Now, after a while, JSTOR got a little spooked, and they decided to shut down access from MIT because they were concerned with all this downloading. So for a few days, nobody from MIT could get onto JSTOR. And that was an inconvenience, for sure, but it was a temporary issue, and after a few days, MIT's access to JSTOR was restored. What Aaron did, whether you call it a prank, whether you call it a consciousness-raising exercise, it was not a crime. The idea that somebody could look at downloading a bunch of articles, basically doing what anyone could have done, but just doing it a little bit faster through an automated computer program, the idea that anybody could think that was a crime was insane to me. Was it inconsiderate? Possibly. Just like many acts of civil disobedience and consciousness-raising are, and Aaron probably would have pleaded guilty to that. JSTOR was the ostensible victim here, but JSTOR made clear from the start that they didn't see this as a federal case. They didn't want Aaron to be prosecuted, and they just basically wanted it to be over with. So why the fuss? Why are we here? Why did this terrible thing happen that has affected all of us? And I think there's three main reasons, and they've all been touched on here today, and I'll go through them briefly. The first is prosecutorial discretion. And in particular, it's a guy whose name you saw a minute ago named Steve Hyman, who is the head of the Computer Crimes Division at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston. You'll hear a little from him and a little about him in Brian's movie. I have nothing good to say about Steve Hyman. You might ask, like I did, what Aaron's actions had to do with computer crimes. Aaron hadn't broken into a secure network, stolen credit card information. He hadn't stolen people's private healthcare data. He hadn't invaded anyone's privacy. He hadn't deprived anybody of anything. He hadn't caused anybody to lose any money. There are things that are computer crimes that we all recognize are dangerous, and this was not one of them. But Steve Hyman did what bureaucrats and functionaries often choose to do, and he wanted to make a big case to justify his existence and justify his budget, and the casualties be damned. And unfortunately, he had a lot of weapons on his side. In addition to just the power of the federal government, he had the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is an overbroad federal statute that has been made yet more broad by prosecutors trying to stretch its terms. And to charge a crime under the CFAA, though, or at least under the indictment in Aaron's case, the government had to prove that he had gained unauthorized access to a computer system. And our defense was really pretty simple. There were going to be other nuances, and we were going to talk a lot about Aaron's purposes and the type of person Aaron was, but he had done only what MIT permitted him to do. He hadn't gained unauthorized access to anything. He had gained access to JSTOR with full authorization from MIT, just like anyone in the jury pool, anyone in this room, anyone in the country could have done. We hoped that the jury would understand that and would acquit Aaron, and it quickly became obvious to us that there really wasn't going to be any opportunity to resolve the case short of trial because Steve Hyman was unreasonable. And of course, after Aaron's passing, it's easy for them to say, oh, the 35 years, that was a bluff. It was never going to happen. It was going to be a few months. That was not what he was telling us. He insisted on a sentence of hard time in federal prison. We said, you know, this is really a very trivial thing. Can't we resolve it in some way with probation or some other thing that makes a little bit more sense but would allow Aaron to get on with his life? He said no. He insisted that Aaron plead to a felony and serve prison time. And of course, what he said, as prosecutors often do, is if you go to trial, it's not going to be so easy. And if you lose, this is a tough judge. I'm going to recommend a very difficult sentence. You may end up having a term of years and not months. And so that was what he was telling us, regardless of these post hoc statements they're making in the media to try to make them seem more reasonable. And it really goes to show you, Brewster was talking a little bit earlier about plea bargains. Prosecutors have so much power in our federal system. They really dictate the charges that are brought. They dictate how serious they are. They dictate the sentence often because, you know, they recommend a window to the judge that goes along with the charges. And if a prosecutor has bad judgment, as Steve Hyman did, if he takes something that is really a harmless effort to point out a problem with our society and the way that we're dealing with information and the way that we're trying to take things out of the public domain and make them unusable by ordinary everyday people, presumably so somebody can make money off them. if a prosecutor takes something and blows it out of proportion and mischarges it, there isn't a lot you can do about that other than fight. And the consequences can be terrible. The second thing, apart from the U.S. attorney, I mean, of course, as a defense lawyer, I never expect prosecutors to do the right thing. But I did expect MIT to do the right thing. JSTOR, as I said, came out and they said, we don't want to see Aaron prosecuted. We consider the matter closed. MIT never did that. And MIT, I have to believe, carries a lot of water in Boston. And I don't know that they could have stopped Hyman from prosecuting Aaron, but they could have done a lot more than they did. MIT is an institution that's known for creativity, for hacking, for pranks, for basically pushing the boundaries and seeing what you can get away with, and hopefully something good will come out of it. And in this case, they responded like a typical corporation. They were entirely gutless, and they were supplicants to the government, and they were doing whatever they could to help the government's case. They were not cooperative with us. A lot of people in the MIT community are furious at MIT, and I think they have every reason to be. And third, there's no question that Aaron paid a price because of who he was, because he was in the habit of sticking his thumb in the eye of the government, of challenging things, of pointing out that certain things are happening that aren't fair. He was an activist. He wasn't afraid to ruffle a few feathers. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. We'll see what the FOIA requests come to. I don't think that there was orders from on high to get Aaron, to hurt Aaron, and that Steve Hyman was just sort of the arm of the law. But there's no question that in our society, those who go along get along better, and Aaron wasn't willing to go along, much to his credit. In the end, before we sit down and watch this movie, the whole thing makes me very sad. It's sad for Aaron and his family and friends, most of all. Sad for all of us that he's not here tonight and able to hack along with all of you. And personally, I'm sad I didn't have the chance to try to help him and walk him out of the courtroom a free man, which I think we could have done, and certainly like he deserved. But it's a wonderful thing that you all are here today and thinking about what we can do to honor Aaron's memory. So thanks very much.
All right. Just a couple notes from everything that he was talking about and things that we found out in later years. We're about to hear from Kevin Poulsen giving his talk, very short 7-minute talk from 2014. He had to sue the Department of Homeland Security to get access to Aaron's FBI file. And this was an ongoing thing in terms of like, why did the FBI have it in for Aaron? It didn't make sense. We finally found out later, in 2018, we found out from Rein Shapiro, Property of the People is his organization, and they also sued the FBI, or in this case, they sued the FBI. Sorry, the Kevin Poulsen's case was against the Department of Homeland Security, both over Aaron's FBI file, though. And what Ryan found out was that somehow Aaron had ended up with a marker on his FBI database record for having somehow been involved in an Al-Qaeda terrorist investigation. So, international terrorist investigation. Now, this, because you might go, huh? What's going on there? You can look at the Aaron Swartz Day website, aaronswartzday.org, and in the upper right-hand corner, it says what Ryan Shapiro found out about Aaron's FBI file with everything there. So there was because this was what we were wondering so much about when the FBI was driving around his house during the Pacer project. And it was like, yeah, he's downloading files off Pacer at libraries across the country. Why would that make the FBI start driving around his house? So these things came out later. These are the pieces of the puzzle that came together. It still doesn't make any sense and wasn't right, but it at least shed a little light on what the hell was going on, why they were even paying attention to him, and why they might have even gotten the idea of downloading journal articles into some kind of big hacker case that was going to make their career. So let's listen to Kevin Poulsen, who's going to make it clear there's a direct connection between MIT actively assisting the government. And we know this because MIT intervened in Kevin's case, and the government allowed them to make further redactions on all of the documents being released before they were given to Kevin. So we still don't know what they did, but it was so bad that they intervened in the case to be able to make further redactions, specifically probably having to do with employee names. But more, you'll see. There's a lot of redactions. So Kevin's going to explain exactly what happened there. And again, just to shed light on the real story about what happened to Aaron. So let's listen to this clip from Kevin Poulsen. Oh, Kevin Poulsen, if I haven't started the clip yet, Kevin Poulsen is who Aaron invented Secure Drop with. The two of them created the prototype together. And it was after Aaron's death, Secure Drop, yay, I feel like Superman, Secure Drop. And it was after Aaron's death that Kevin Poulsen took it to the Freedom of the Press Foundation and worked out with Trevor Tim, Garrett Robinson, and many people to take Secure Drop under their wing. And it is how it became the Secure Drop that we know and love today. So Kevin Poulsen is very involved in a lot of things going on with Aaron, and he took it upon himself to try to get to the bottom of what might have been going on and sue the Department of Homeland Security over Aaron's FBI file. Let's watch this video.
So I'm Kevin Poulsen. I'm a contributing editor at Wired magazine, and I'm the one that recruited Aaron to the project that is now Secure Drop. While my presentation is getting set up, I'll say that what the Freedom of the Press Foundation and everybody who's contributed to that project and the hackathons has made of that greatly exceeds, I think, any expectations that Aaron had for that when he was working on it. It's an astonishing achievement, and one that's become far more important, I think, than it was even when we started. So I've been asked to talk about my Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security and where we stand with the files. For those just tuning in, after Aaron passed, I, as well as a lot of other journalists and bloggers and independent investigators, very quickly filed Freedom of Information Act requests with the Secret Service, and we all received the same letter where the agency summarily denied the request on the grounds that it pertained to an ongoing law enforcement investigation, which was ludicrous under the circumstances. I filed an appeal. The department ignored the appeal, and then with the help of David Sobel, an attorney with the FF and one of the greatest FOIA litigators in the country, we sued DHS and very quickly got a court order obliging them to start producing documents. At that point, MIT and JSTOR moved to intervene in the case. They were concerned that despite the government's great skill at redacting documents, that some information might slip through that would identify MIT or JSTOR personnel who contributed to the investigation, and they might face some sort of retaliation, probably from Anonymous. We reached an agreement with them where they're allowed to preview each collection of documents before it's released to me and suggest redactions of their own. There was some concern at the time that they would abuse that to redact more than just identifying information. So far, it looks like the redactions have just been a word here or there, and email addresses and that sort of thing. What we've gotten out of this so far is 2,889 pages, 177 photos and 11 videos, including the video of Aaron being booked at the Cambridge Police Department. In the last batch, this will be of interest to maybe 2 or 3 of you. really closely follow this. But in the last batch, we actually got the Python script that Aaron wrote to extract the documents from JSTOR. This is actually the thing I'm asked about the most, is when is keepgrabbing.py going to be released? In the last 2 batches, we've seen for the first time some large blocks of material being redacted. And they're being redacted under FOIA exemption B5, which covers pre-decision deliberative processes. So if the government is working on something and they haven't made a decision and they're exchanging memos back and forth discussing what to do, that's when that would apply, or a draft of a treaty, that sort of thing. And for the first time, we're seeing a notation indicating an outside agency, that not the Secret Service and not DHS, that has made those redactions. And it's the Executive Office of the U.S. Attorney. And all of these redactions appear to be emails either from or to Stephen Heyman, the prosecutor on the case. So it's hard to tell what's being redacted by, definition. It's not there. But as it turns out, MIT and JSTOR also released documents in the wake of the controversy over all of this. And some of them were messages that were redacted from the government's release. So we actually can see what's underneath them. And it's nothing, it's nothing that you would call a smoking gun. Instead, it's more like it's very puzzling why they would want to redact this. So this message to MIT from Steve Heyman, or to JSTOR from the prosecutor, is asking about the naming convention of the PDF files that were downloaded. It baffles me as to why they would consider this sensitive. This one, huge block of redacted text here, is the reply from JSTOR, which you imagine is going to be the Pentagon Papers or something. And now it's a detailed examination of the numbering system that JSTOR uses for numbering their documents. Keep in mind, this was released by JSTOR voluntarily and redacted by the US government for reasons of their own. And then this one, and again, an entire block that turns out to be the stuff that the prosecutor is asking MIT to bring to an interview. So this I think bears some further scrutiny. I just discovered the unredacted versions of these in the MIT and JSTOR documents yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to talk to David Sobel about it yet. But to me, it looks a little questionable. If you want to see the documents for yourself, this week I've compiled them all into a single place, swartzfiles.com. You'll also find the FBI and US Marshals files on Aaron there, and a compilation of all the documents that have been released by MIT and JSTOR to date, as well as all of the videos and the photographs that I just described. And thank you.
You're muted.
Damn. Okay. Hey, so that was Kevin Poulsen explaining about his case against the Department of Homeland Security, getting Aaron's FBI file and what he was able to find out. And basically, we just found out that, MIT worked with the government instead of sort of letting things go. We know that JSTOR tried to drop everything. They didn't want to pursue it. And MIT, instead of letting it go, they also had some new people on the IT staff that were confused by this. Might have reacted differently if they had had more seasoned people that were kind of used to this stuff at MIT. Just a lot of perfect storm of bad circumstances that sort of swirled around Aaron and this grand jury. So that's what happened. And we'll be talking about it, in the months to come. We're going to do one of these every month now, and it's going to be always just Aaron history and kind of Aaron philosophy, and looking deeply into him and what he did. And today's philosophy, sociology part of it Andre is going to take us on, and he did a whole beautiful presentation at Aaron Swartz Day last year. And what we're going to do is take that and break it into smaller chunks and really take a deep dive into some of the things that Aaron was writing about and thinking about. And it's really prolific. When you read this stuff now, it fits right in now with everything that's happening, except he wrote it all 10 or 20 years ago when he was a teenager, a lot of this stuff. So it's very interesting. So take it away, Andre. Oh, and we're going to pause for questions in between a couple times during the presentation. So if you have a question, just ask it when it pops into your head, and we'll be sure to ask it during those breaks. All right, take it away, Andre. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Can I make 2 little comments on what has been shown already?
Oh, yeah. Say whatever you want. Oh, yeah.
Okay. I was remember some things I've been reading about Aaron and cases like his. And when I was studying vigilance here in Brazil in 2013, there were mass protests here. I read a lot about police persecution and how they created these files on people. So I found one article of the New York Times of Albury, FBI agent in 2011. And he's talking how they start watching someone, like they started following one person that is a suspect, and they are always creating this backlog that speaks against someone. And this backlog doesn't need to prove anything is wrong, but the mere existence of it is enough to make the person seems more and more suspect. So the more they investigate it, the more reason they have to go after the person. This creates some kind of a snowball effect that if you start somehow to investigate someone, it will be found guilty somehow.
Yeah, we have that problem here with our police prediction software, where they're feeding in the bad data of the cops going to look for crime in bad neighborhoods for no reason, and they're training the prediction system on that bad data, and so it perpetuates. So yeah, and innocent till proven guilty isn't necessarily the case, and especially when they just want to overcharge, see what sticks, to have a high a high rate of conviction. Next week, we're going to take a look at Brewster talking about exactly that, plea bargaining as a form of torture, what it has become, in the sense of overcharging, and you're just going to be in jail for 20 years, or you could plead out to like a couple charges and maybe see your family again in 5 or 10 years, and how that has become the norm now, instead of just something that some asshole prosecutor would do. That's the norm now, instead of having to make real cases. So yeah, that's really it's interesting to me that that's sort of universal thing, right? It doesn't matter if we're where we are. And you're going to talk next week about the political sides of a lot of this, which I think on this too. Yeah. Okay, great. Anything else you wanted to start your talk?
Yeah, I'll explain this better in the talk, but there's another thing that I wanted to talk, that is this idea, a mystical idea of what a hacker means. It's almost like people don't know exactly what is coding and what is computer programming. So they imagine this thing that Anonymous uses a lot too, that's a person in a dark room with a mask,
right,
doing something malicious.
The Mr. Robot, the shrouded figure, doing the thing. Well, so we like to use Leonardo da Vinci and Benjamin Franklin as the hackers. And when you tell people that, because we, especially in the United States, we treat them like they're incredible. There were probably other people maybe doing what they did at that time, that we will never find out about, but those are the ones we know about. And they were so far above what everybody else was doing, but they were definitely hackers. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci, he's digging up bodies to look at the body parts. right?
Yeah.
I mean, if that isn't hacking, I don't know what is, you know? So yeah, so we need to, that's partly why we're doing this podcast, to inspire a new generation of hackers. You know, it's very important that they know that this is an option to be curious and figure things out for yourself and share knowledge. And now that we have the internet, share it with each other. And it's very, very important part of it all.
Yeah, there is a beautiful history about a counterculture in the United States and how hacking becomes something that is a cultural like milestone for creating the industries of the computing programs we have today and the machines, and how we appropriate this to have in our homes and not only in big companies. It's a great story to be told one of our podcasts.
Yeah, and the internet wouldn't have happened, you know, and Tim Berners-Lee is a hacker, definitely, right? For him to like make that and give it away to everybody. I mean, he's absolutely a hacker. So it's really funny the way that society decides which hackers are heroes and which hackers to snuff out of existence, you know, and it's really just depending on, you know, how it suits them at the time, you know, because it goes back and forth too. If you look at Tesla, you know, whether he's being propped up half the time and snuffed out the other half of the time, because their hackers can be a little hard to control. They like to try to keep them under control. And that's when, that's when things can get ugly. And they're generally very sensitive, can be very sensitive people too, easily bruised and insecure and all that kind of stuff. So that's how everything sort of, we think, what happened with Aaron, that he just, things just got to be too heavy, too many weights at once. Okay, great. You want to give your talk? Take it away, Andre.
Yeah. Let me get to it without further ado.
Yes.
So,
but that's the point, is that we, you know, really want to just open it up and have everybody talk about and ask questions about, you know, anything that they are wondering about. So go ahead and bring that up. There's some typing in your room. Maybe you want to close the door or something so we don't.
I am trying to set up the presentation, but
no, I mean before when you weren't typing, there was some other typing. So tell the other typers to stop during your presentation. Okay. All right, I'm going to let you.
Grant, can you put my presentation on screen too?
Oh, you will just share your tab.
Yeah, try to share a screen.
So it's in the bottom of your, in the studio, right? That middle button, share screen.
Yeah, I did that, but it shows us the backstage of the presentation here of the Restream studio.
Oh, sorry, Lisa, you're muted.
Is it in a browser? It needs to be in a browser window, Andre.
It's
unless there's no sound. Is there no sound?
No sound.
Okay, so you just hit that presentation window.
I have done that. It's on the backstage of the Restream, like another person that is waiting to get in this talk.
Oh, I see. Give me 1 second, Andre.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yay. Great.
Okay. So
and then go ahead and take me out, Grant.
I'm here as Brazil's Aaron Swartz Institute researcher. Is something that maybe you're not familiar yet, that Brazil as a country in South America has something like an institute in the honor of Aaron Swartz. So maybe you can be heard way further than you imagine. Our history, we are founded on September 13, 2022. The Institute Aaron Swartz Brazil was created to encourage knowledge emancipation through research and diffusion of information about digital individual rights on the internet. We work to create a free, diverse, and safe internet for all. We defend freedom, privacy, and the democratization of technology access, including the free access to culture and information. Therefore, we believe in the neutrality of the network and defend the open science. We strive for the promotion of innovation, pedagogical reinvention, and the use of free software. We consider fundamental to incorporate in the network architecture the values of respect for the user autonomy and the transparency of private and public organizations. So our history is attached to the history of the Pirates Party in Brazil and its reformulation after change in electoral law. I won't go further into detail, but that's where we came from and why there is an institute inspired by Aaron Swartz here in our country. So here is a little contact information if anyone wants to say hello to us. And I'm here to talk about my research and how we would like to look at Aaron and search for something like interrupted social theory. And why we are going to do that, it's because we are not coming from nowhere. Me, André Sobral, I'm a sociologist, so I study society, but I have done my master's and PhD in computer engineering science. I study this interaction of computer science and society, how we deal with these images like hackers, programs, how these softwares change our lives. And then we have Aaron Swartz, that it's known as a programmer, but self-identifies as an applied sociologist. So Aaron, it's like the opposite of my path. He did the other way. And we have this Brazilian researcher, Rafael Zanata, that he says in a tweet that has been a long time since he wrote about Aaron, but he still thinks that would be worth to write a book about interrupted social theory that he was developing. So Aaron would be this person that would be so devoted to thinking of sociology and our society that he was trying to do something that if he had lived longer, it probably would result in a social theory. So he suggests that we go this way, thinking about how Aaron thought about society using his blog. And then he imagined that the text would be from his 18-year-olds to 26. But not quite like that. When you go to Aaron Swartz's blog, the Rot Off today, that's how it's called. And you have texts so old that go to the year 2000. So Aaron was just a boy there. He's still in his high school years, writing in his blog about how he thought about the world. And it's kind of astonishing that in this time, he wasn't just making kids talk, like talking about his time on classes or lunch or things like new games or things like that. He was reading books about pedagogy. He was complaining about the school system. He was mobilizing and thinking the world that could be. So when I try to look at all these texts and imagine if Aaron had a social theory, something that was interrupted, I came across a lot of things. And what would be this systematic reading to understand the Aaron thought that I made? I reread this text that he was writing on his blog. I counted how much of text was written. I created a searchable database so I can find themes by searching the themes on a search window. I draw some comments on what I thought of his thoughts. And I try to create categories of relevance of his text through idea of a social thought being produced and the academic references that Aaron quoted and read. So this is what it looks like, Google Drive full of documents. Each document is a post on his blog. And this is a category that I made with the relevance of the text, the name of the text, the dates, the number of pages of written text, and the authors that were quoted with links to each of the texts that had been read by Aaron. So the idea was to create this image of how Aaron was reading, which texts and which authors he was reading often, and if he was quoting them together in the same article. So Aaron was doing like a researcher and using many references to create a text that is solid and with a good argument, or was he just spouting anything that at the top of his head? And then I was looking with this yellow markings that Aaron was also saying what he think that was a very good read, like recommending books, recommending authors. So I started marking them too when he did that. And as I said, I commented what I thought that was interesting to understand Aaron thought as a possible social theory. So this is the timestamp from 2000 to 2002. We have 79 pages of text. Aaron had 14 to 16 years there. From 2002 to 2005, Aaron had 16 to 19 years old, and he wrote 414 pages. And from 2005 to 2012, he had 19 to 25 years old. He wrote 860 pages. I created these graphs to show the difference of text he wrote and how relevant I thought they were. So we can see that there's a high volume of text, but not all of it is relevant. But usually when he writes something relevant, he writes a lot on the same post. So there are many small quotes of day-to-day life and traveling and all these things on the blog, but there is a lot of things that are deep dives on concepts or discussions. So why is this why is this of any relevance to us now? If we want to understand Aaron, we can see what Aaron was looking at, what was reading, and what happened at the time. So we can try to understand that Aaron didn't look at society and at events that were happening without context. He was always trying to get new ways of understanding what was happening, and these new ways of understanding were based on sociology, education, science and philosophy, and economy. So he was very well, I don't know how I can express this in English. He read a lot. He was very cult. So I was dividing this text on these themes, and Lisa came to me and said that this year of 2024 is a year of elections in the United States, very important ones. So it would be very interesting to have here on the podcast a small space to talk about how Aaron understood politics and what we could see on the future of our discussion about Aaron and who he was, something that was more elaborate than just the movie or the book that is already out. So I'm going to be going with you on this journey of rereading Aaron texts and talking about some of the concepts and things that Aaron was very interested in talking. So I think that's a good time to see if there is any questions or a small window. Does anyone has any doubts on YouTube or any questions about? Well, since no one sent any questions, I will just keep moving. So if you have an idea of what Aaron read, you're going to see John Searle as the most quoted author. He's a philosopher. He talks a lot about science and rationality. There is some of his books there, Making the Social World, The Mysteries of Consciousness, Rediscovery of the Mind and Mind. So 4 books that he quotes 2 times each, and the grand total of 15 times in all this time that I read about Aaron's work. So it's a main reference. Just after John Searle, we have Alfie Kohn, an educator. He's a student of pedagogy, a professor of pedagogy. He quotes a lot of times, 5 times, Punished by Rewards. That is a book about how students are encouraged in the wrong way. And Unconditional Parenting. He quotes 3 times. There is Peter Singer, 11 times, the utilitarist philosopher, and he writes a lot of social criticism. And Aaron quotes 3 times The Life You Can Save, 2 times Animal Liberation, and 2 times Democracy and Disobedience. And Peter Singer is a more polemic author. So I put exclamation points there, because Peter Singer is often criticized by Aaron, and is criticized also by the mainstream. I mean, he becomes someone that is known for complicated ideas that we can touch in other podcasts. And then we have Aaron quoting a lot of Keynes, economist, and is not well taught or understood by most of the liberal school of economics. He's the economist that wants more intervention of the state, more investment. Aaron reads a lot of it, and he quotes 6 times the book General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money from John Maynard Keynes. And we have John Elster, philosopher, that talks a lot about science. Aaron wanted a lot to know how science explains the world and how he could use this to understand other things. There's 3 times the book Explaining Social Behavior, and 2 times the book Political Psychology. So you can have a little bit of an idea of where Aaron is going when he's going to talk about politics, because the next 3 here are in the field of politics. And Barbara Einreich is going to use Nickel and Dime and Bait and Switch. There are 2 books that are about the daily lives of workers and the experience in the United States. And it's almost an ethnography. So it's a person living the life and relating about it on the text. And Aaron used to really like these texts. He quotes 3 times the Nickel and Dime and 2 times the Bait and Switch. We have George Donhoff, that is a sociologist and talks a lot about politics. And he quotes Who Really Rules and Who Rules America. So 2 books about structure of power, like party and politics. We have Paul Krugman, an economist, that talks about political economy. And Aaron there is worried about this book of Paul Krugman, The Return of Depression Economics. So he's thinking what happened after 2008 and how can we create a different country and what kind of policy was being made. So from 2000 to 2002, we have Aaron as a kid with 14 to 16 years old, as I said before, and he's reading a lot of things about pedagogy. So Pedagogy of Your Press from Paulo Freire, it's a Brazilian author. We have Marshall McLuhan, The Medium is the Message, talking about communication, how it's important to imagine this process of educating as a process of communicating to the students. We have the Teenage Liberation Handbook, different kind of teacher, how children fail, how children learn, teaching as a subversive I can pronounce this right, subversive activity, the quality school, mathematician apology, and the schooling society. So we have this time of life that Aaron is really worried about his experience in school, how it was very hard for him to concentrate in classes and deal with teachers that were saying things that were wrong. And he was always trying to reform school. So there is this tension of going to school and make it better and not going to school and finding a new way to educate yourself. So he's trying a lot to sympathize with this homeschooling, but it's not the homeschooling that you're used to listening about on America. It's more about the idea of unschooling, the sense of you have this community of persons that are very intelligent and very well studied that will be on the close proximity to the students, and they will be trying to take the students and show him an aspect of life and how to deal with it. So it would be more like a practical pedagogy instead of the idea of the normal curriculum on your house. From 2002 to 2005, yet there is this approximation to Lawrence Lessig, the interest of Aaron to understand more about the rights of copy. So there is the approximation to the effort of creating an idea of a common culture, common access to knowledge, an effort of be a militant for the open access. It's what led to all this history we were talking about before. So his concern with his information, science, and truth come from these authors mainly. You can see here Code and the Other Laws of Cyberspace from Lawrence Lessig, The Death and Life of Great American Cities from Jane Jacobs, The Elements of Typographic Style. This is a book that he likes a lot, but it's about how fonts change the way you read text. The Future of Ideas, The Great Retail Fraud in Science, and The Mismeasure of Men. So this time, Aaron is questioning the structure there is in society that is restrictive to access of knowledge. So people want to learn and they face these barriers. And at the same time, he's questioning science as an official structure that talks about truth. So how can we understand the good science and the bad science and separate both of them? And how can we apply these ideas to understand the world and other things? From 2005 to 2012, he keeps his way on education, talking about these experiences of education and work balance. I mean, how society expects persons to be formed. There is this critique of curriculum and disciplinary separation, the classes that's separated by age, criticizing the standardized tests. He is very concerned about how professors are restricted to subjects, so there is no interaction between different areas of knowledge, like math doesn't talk to geography, that doesn't talk to history, so these things are too isolated for him. He is concerned that students are also restricted in the sense that they don't really interact with other things out of school, and the subjects are closed in class. And he is affirming how education isn't neutral, in the sense that he's reading things that contradicts professors, and professors have a side when they choose how they're gonna explain a part of history or a part of another subject that he needs to learn. So here's an excerpt, a part of what Aaron wrote in his blog that shows how he thought about education. It's clear that most of the students are bored most of the time, including me, while others don't exactly enjoy speaking, afraid they will get an answer wrong and look stupid in front of the whole class. They speak quietly or cover their mouth while they talk, trying to make sure only the teacher can hear them. When the teacher indicates they were right and asks them to speak up, then they are happy to tell the rest of the class. So Aaron is concerned here about how the other students are shy and afraid of failure in class. And this is a problem for him. Do we have any questions? No, not yet. Okay.
Any questions from it anywhere? I wanted to know, I see in these books that he's looking at, because I remember there were a number of posts about Noam Chomsky. Were there any other authors that stood out the way that he did when you sort of looked? I remembered from your presentation, there were a few authors that kind of stood, I mean, only it was a couple books instead of one book, but anyone besides Noam Chomsky that comes to mind?
Yeah, the ones that stood out were those ones that I put here in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, Noam Chomsky, it's very important.
Oh, I love it. And you got the actual books. This is great. Okay, sorry, I missed that slide.
Noam Chomsky is very, very important because of the impact of what he said, but he wasn't quoted very often. So I'm not sure if Aaron just didn't have what he needed at the time to write about it, or he just was so moved that he just agreed with everything. There's no criticism or nothing to add. I don't know.
It seemed like it with Understanding Power. I mean, it seemed like he took it in. It made me go look it up. You know, it was the kind of thing where when people read a book and they feel like it changes their view, and then you want to look at it. Okay, no other questions, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, great. Carry on.
Yeah. He quoted Noam Chomsky twice only, in all his years. So it's not very often. So here a little bit of a sneak peek of some things that we're going to be discussing. But Aaron, when he was talking about politics, he was concerned with the politics of parties, not only of voters or individuals. So he writes a little about how these parties are structured. He creates a strong reflection on the role of the state, in the sense of what we expect from the state, what its attributions. He is concerned with the power abuse of the state that he becomes victim later. So it's kind of a prediction that comes to reality. He is very fond of autobiographies. So there is a lot of books, if you look at here, that is, oh, Chomsky is here. There is about the history of American politics in the sense of the biographies of presidents, Nixon and we have here Bill Clinton, and we have the other one from Bush. So he's following this great figure history in the sense of the narrative of one great person or one leader. We have the reflection of Aaron about transparency. There was a strong discussion at the time that he was writing and reading about those things, that the problem of government was not enough transparency. So he was very dedicated to discuss this matter, and we're going to be talking about it in the next podcast. And the difference between the mechanism of politics and the narratives of politics. 1 second. In the sense that a lot of things are said about politics, but we are often not paying attention of how politics work, in the sense that politics is like a well-oiled machine, and it has all of these events and things that we have to pay attention to create something that has also an impact. It's not just about having the right views or the right ideas, is how to make them happen. So this is a thing that is very interesting that we're going to be discussing in the next podcast. If you look here at the books, we have Washington, Babylon, that is about Bill Gates. We have Understanding Power from Chomsky. We have Showdown, Gucci Gulch, that's about lawmakers and lobbyists. We have Before the Storm, about Bush. We have Rick Perry and his eggheads, about political operation in America. We have The Exile, that's about the fall of the Soviet Union. We have Turkmenistan, that's about a political scandal that happened a while ago. I don't remember the details. We have The Great Derangement, that is about also a political scandal in the White House. The Conservative Nanny State is about how the state usually gives a lot of handouts to companies, and how the conservatives that don't want a big state don't actually go for this approach when they're governing. They also create structures that support and invest public money. They're not also against state intervention. The Republican War on Science, it is a concern of Aaron about how the political field was using the political discourse to go against the universities and researchers. Speaking Freely is about free speech in America and politics. Who Governs, it's about political elites and how they are created and how they run the state and not actually the candidates. Moral Politics, that we're going to be talking about liberalism in America and how the discourse on conservatives and liberalism works. The Reactionary Mind, that talks about conservatism in America. Nixonland, it's a story of Nixon. Political Fictions, it's about how they create histories to sell candidates and parties. The Soft Cage is about surveillance and the idea of war on terror. Beyond the Adversary Democracy, it's a text that talks about American politics trying to get out of the idea of the two-partisan system. Manufacturing Consent talk about how to create the popular support to wars in America. Unequal Democracy talks about how political economy is determined in this age that we live in, of Democrats against Republicans. The predator states talk about how the state is also going way more interventionist than we should be expecting. We're going to talk more about those books later in other podcasts. The Power Broker is also about the story of interventions in American politics with scandal corruption. So a small excerpt from Aaron's thoughts on politics. In general, you should be skeptical whenever someone tries to sell you on something like reform or transparency. The problem with generating database isn't that they are too hard to read. It's the lack of investigation and enforcement power. And websites do nothing to help with that. Since no one is in charge of verifying them, most of the things reported in transparency database are simply lies. So Aaron is concerned that we have a very big gap between feeling that we have access or power and how we actually have access or power. So there are examples on those videos that we watched before here, but if something is kept away from the public because it's used on an investigation, or if the state determines that some documents have 10 or 100 years of protected like secret status until it's no longer a concern of state, when you create these big databases of leaked documents, what happened with those documents and what we can do from them onwards, in the sense of how the public uses this data, is very different from just their being put on a site or they're being released by the government. So this is a subject that we're going to be talking further next podcast. That is, how can we understand that politics is about what we can do with things, not only what we support or what we believe in. Do you have anything you want to say, Lisa?
Yeah, no questions. Just go ahead and wrap it up, and we will move on to the second part of the podcast.
So this is what I was more concerned to talk about, the ones that about politics. But Aaron also had a lot of things that he studied about science and philosophy. And we have this little excerpt from his blog talking about Singer and how he was not really comfortable with some of the ideas of Singer had taught, but also connecting to politics. Somehow later in life, Singer had become a sociobiologist, one of that vulgar group of pseudoscientists who insist, despite all evidence, that humans are genetically programmed to do everything a right-wing politician could imagine. We have a lot of talk about economy that is also about politics, but in another sense. So he read a lot about these topics too. Another excerpt here. Think back to the dot-com era, when venture capitalists were spending all their money laying fiber optic cables under the streets. The right solution wasn't for the Fed to raise interest rates until even punch-drunk venture capitalists could realize all these investments in fiber wouldn't be profitable. The right solution was to take their money away, give it to the poor. We'll spend it on something useful like food and clothing. So we have this clue that Aaron was very left-wing oriented, in the sense that he was concerned about poverty, about using well the money, about taxing riches. So that's also something that people don't actually think a lot when they're thinking about Aaron as a hacker or as an activist. And we have all this reading of sociology that goes to the label applied sociologist, that shows an Aaron that is worried about how we understand society too. So another excerpt here. If you have any doubts about the power of the think tanks, look no further than the story of the bell curve, written by Charles Murray, who received over 1.2 million from right-wing foundations for his work. The book claimed that IQ tests revealed Black people to be genetically less intelligent than whites, thus explaining their low place in society. So Aaron is also here making this connection of culture and what we understand of nature in society, I mean, how things work, and how politics is involved in that, with investments, with foundations, with studies that claim things about the world. So Aaron is a very prolific writer when you're gonna try to make this kind of bigger picture panorama to understand the world. And this is the interesting part. The idea of a social theory of Aaron can go through many places that we are not often expecting. So is there in social theory and interrupted social theory in Aaron's work? I believe there is enough reference academic material to have this superficial social theory being formed, but it was interrupted before maturing. There is no denying that this militant history and left-wing political interest pointed to a stronger future as social scientists. We ask for your help if you want to help us coming here to this podcast, or helping in any other way you can, asking questions, helping as you imagine. We want to keep going with this discussion, go further, and try to understand Aaron for more than the icon or the hacker or the programmer. We want to understand Aaron as someone that imagined a different world. So if you want to support us, here's contact information for myself, and I will be here answering questions to the end and come back in other editions.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for that, Andre. And next week, Andre will come back to do a deeper analysis of Aaron's political posts, where he believes that Aaron is developing a theory that participation in democracy may be more important than voting itself. All the other ways, you want to just say a little bit about what you're going to be talking about next week?
Yeah, we have this idea of democracy as being able to vote each election, but Aaron saw it further. He starts by making a criticism of the idea that left-wing have, that if you convince the people, you don't need to actually have anyone elected. The people will make the difference. And then he goes to try to verify this in the world. So you're going to see a lot of texts of Aaron. Imagine, how do you use these systems of politics in America? How can we make a difference? What is needed to make a change? And how can we be more active in this? So there is a difference between democracy as voting and democracy as participating. So we're going to invite you all to participate more in democracy and think about how you can be active and not just a voter. Not that voting is not important. It's just that it's only one aspect.
Yes. And by the time you get to the polls to vote, a lot of the big battles have already been fought and won or lost. And it always feels like we are playing a game where we don't have all the rules, and the things are happening. You know, it's always too late by the time we hear about things. So this will be really interesting to do this over the course of the year, as we are in our election. All the words that popped into my head were derogatory. It's just an election, but it's like, what's going to happen? We're not sure. And the misinformation issues, and there's so many things going on. So we're just going to start and keep up on it. And we're really depending on you, our audience too, and viewers, to let us know if something happens that we want to let people know about here. Because it's, you know, especially with our elections here in the States, there's 50 states, and there's individual shenanigans going on in the little states and the little counties. And, you know, but if we figure it out in one place, then at least we can look for that particular shenanigan maybe in the other states. So, you know, we'll see how it works out. Thank you very much, Andre, for that talk. And next week also, we're going to have someone else from the Aaron Swartz Institute, Bruna Shinohara, who has a PhD in quantum computing, and will be talking to us about open software and hardware in her field, and about Aaron's pursuit of open access and science, and the importance of open access science in the global South. So Andre will be talking, and also Bruno will be talking, and it's going to be very exciting. Okay, so we have finished the history part of the podcast. The history part is always going to come first because that's what you said you wanted. And now we're going to, oh, you're asking when that be. It'll be next Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. UTC. So we're going to have, next Saturday in February. It'll be the 17th of February, I believe, is that Saturday. So it's the middle Saturday of every month. That's what we're doing. Yeah, I screwed that up and said next week. It's only once a month. Sorry, Scott. It's only once a month that we'll be doing it to start with. If it starts to pick up, we may do it more than that as the year picks up, but we're going to start off with once a month. I mainly wanted to make sure that we had a really good discussion and could catch everybody up on Aaron's story and what we found out about his story. And now we can start off together, and we know we'll do it at least once a month, and we can meet more often than that moving forward if we need to, as things happen. I think it's going to be a very exciting year. So now let's bring on our guest for today, Timid Robot from Creative Commons. Yay. Hi, Timid.
Hello, greetings. It's good to be here.
Great. Timid is the director of technology, and they are very excited about telling us a little bit more about the new website, and that you did in conjunction with a new legal tool management app. And what is all that stuff? And let us know how we can put it to use.
Yeah. And so it's continuing the theme of accessibility. The Creative Commons website had kind of grown in a patchwork Frankenstein manner the previous years, and so it was an effort to bring together the various parts of the website and provide a UX that would hopefully kind of empower people to access the information, the legal tools, instead of hinder them.
Okay. And when did that all launch?
That launched at the very end of September last year.
Okay.
And a big portion of that was rewriting the tools we use to manage all of our legal tools, all of the Creative Commons licenses. Lots of people are familiar, like they'll go and they'll see that we have the 6 kind of current licenses, the CC0 public domain tool. And what they don't realize is that there's actually over 600 licenses because of the previous versions and the fact that the previous versions were adapted to specific legal jurisdictions, so that they had kind of custom language for each legal jurisdiction.
Did you say 600 licenses?
Over 600.
Yeah. Over 600. Okay. I thought maybe I misheard you. Okay.
Yeah. And so, the application manages all of those, and then each legal tool, each license has what we call the deed, which is kind of a plain language summary that most of us who are not lawyers use to understand what's happening. The actual legal text, which we call the legal code, and then a machine readable kind of metadata file that's in RDF XML. And then the deeds and the legal code are each translated separately. And so what that means is there's almost 30,000 documents to manage in an effort to make the Creative Commons licenses accessible to, kind of the largest portion of the globe as we possibly can.
Yeah, and there's an API too, isn't there? That was
there is an API. It was an older effort, and I expect it will be deprecated. The API, the information that's presented, it doesn't change very often, and it's not that complex. And so there's really no reason to query it over the network. Okay. I'm hoping that we'll be able to work with folks to move that to, just a simple JSON or YAML file, because it's kind of an oversized solution.
Okay, so it was never it was never necessarily needed anyway, but people kind of got used to it. I just remember you talking about how there was a number of systems that were used to using this thing.
Yeah. Well, the API, it's kind of a product of its time. There was a time in software development where APIs were very, very popular, and some of our more, some of the data formats that we have now hadn't yet been developer popularized. And so it was, it's one of those things that was a good idea, great effort when it was done, but over the intervening decades, it's lost a little bit of its allure.
All right. All right, great. And I remember you were at DWeb camp, and there's
Mhm.
been a lot going on with DWeb, and we had a really interesting workshop there uh, talking about the ways that Creative Commons could help sort of foster DWeb principles and things like that. And I'm just wondering if there's anything specific that people could do to get involved, with that effort of with DWeb, a DWeb initiative, or anything specific. I thought there was going to be something coming up. I may have jumped the gun on that and put you on the spot, but I just wanted
Yeah.
to ask in case it was a thing.
I don't have anything specific for you today.
Okay.
But I really, one of the things that's really lovely about Aaron Swartz as a role model was his demonstration that we can engage and we can positively impact the world. And I love this historic presentation and kind of this description of the way that Aaron educated himself and reached out. And I'm one of the beautiful legacies of Aaron's work is that there's more information available today. There's more open access journals today than there were when Aaron was active. And so it's, yeah, I love seeing people engage and imagine, work towards a better world that they've imagined.
Yay. Well, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about for us. That's what it was all about for Aaron. And that's what it's all about. A lot of the organizations that we're going to be talking about in a minute, that Aaron worked with, or Freedom of the Press Foundation is taking over Secure Drop now. EFF, Internet Archive. We really are trying to make the world a better place. It's not a cliche. It's become a cliche. It's so weird now with all the weird, all the superhero TV shows and all the stuff where they've sort of turned it, making the world a better place, into a cliche, but it's not really a cliche for us. We're like actually trying to do it. And that's actually another reason why we decided to do this podcast, so we could make announcements every week after we do the history and let people know about stuff that's going on. So the announcements for today, I'll go ahead and give them. Not a lot, because we just started doing this. The number one announcement is that Aaron's father, Robert, is looking for a kidney. And it's sort of a strange ask, but that's what's going on right now. He is type O preferably. And the way that it works is that if you are willing to give up a kidney, whether or not you were an actual match for Robert, you kind of put your kidney into the system, and then they will find him a match if your kidney is not already in itself a match. So that's how that works. And Susan Aaron's mother has been putting out the word for that. And I told her I would give a little shout out today just to let people know that that is a thing. Let's see. Internet Archive, libraries are still under attack. This just in. They've filed a number of amicus briefs, have been filed in support. And some of the organizations, I just wanted to read them off really quick. American Library Association and Association of Research Libraries, Authors Alliance, Center for Democracy and Technology, Library Freedom Project and Public Knowledge, Copia Institute, Copyright Scholars, eBook Study Group, Library Futures Project, Every Library Institute, Readers First, Spark, ASERL, BLC, PALCI, Urban Libraries Unite, and 218 individual libraries. Hathi Trust, intellectual property law professors, Kevin L. Smith and William M. Cross, law library directors, professors, and academics, and Wikipedia, Creative Commons, and Project Gutenberg, all filed amicus briefs in support. And so hopefully the good guys will win on that one. We will be tracking that very closely during these announcements. So no other announcements today, but we will be doing that with, like I said, the Secure Drop Internet Archive, EFF, and we could have your announcement. And in fact, you might come on the show and make your announcement if you have a project or something that you're trying to get help for. So join up and look for that. And we're putting it at the end of the show, so we'll front load it with the history like everybody wants. So, all right. Well, that is it for today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Timid, for coming on and giving us our Creative Commons update. Thank you, Andre, for your presentation. And thank you, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate you being here. And it's going to be an interesting year in 2024, and we're going to go through it together. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.